Grief is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome to the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm the founder of the Empower Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode brings real conversations with people around the world who have navigated grief and discovered the strength to creating inspiring beginnings. Together, we'll walk from grief to empowerment through stories, practical tools, and actionable insights. You'll uncover the hidden gifts within your grief, reclaim your personal power, and step into a future filled with courage and hope. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. Her name is Jessica Moyer. She's a transformative wellness and leadership coach, TEDx speaker, three-time author who empowers women and leaders to reclaim their energy, resilience, and purpose. With over 25 years of experience and certifications from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, John Maxwell, Ziegler Legacy, Jessica equips others to thrive using her signature REAL framework rooted in mindset, meals, and movement. She's a certified hormone and integrative nutrition coach, grief movement coach, and she draws very deeply from her personal journey of loss that includes the deaths of her infant son Stephen, her two unborn children, and her father, to help others find healing, hope, and wholeness. Her faith led, heart centered approach offers a beacon of light through grief, burnout, and life transitions. Beyond her coaching and books, Jessica is a passionate community leader who's raised over $2 million for Cure SMA and served in numerous nonprofit roles. She's also the founder of the Ice House Wellness and Community in Delaware. She's been married to her husband Jason for 27 years and is a proud mom of four, including her angel baby Steven. And her message is clear: when you lead yourself well, you can lead others even better. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to Jessica. Jessica, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris. I'm excited to be here with you.
Likewise, and I know it's been a little bit since you and I last connected, but I've been very much looking forward to this as well. I also just want to say that's incredible that you raised $2 million for Cure SMA. That's a proud accomplishment.
Yeah, thank you.
And I also want to say too, I'm very sorry that you and I are part of the club. I like to say as lost parents. It's not one that we want to belong to. But I have found being part of that lost community, I have found some of the most beautiful people in the world to connect with. And so I'm just really grateful that we get to meet today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you a little story about how significant this day is.
Yeah, well, to get us started today, I'd love for you to share a little bit with listeners more about your story.
Yeah, today is September 25th. And when we had planned this date, it didn't really dawn on me. And then I looked at the date, and today, 24 years ago, I sat at Bethesda Naval Hospital and received the news of my son's diagnosis. So, you think of the birth dates and the death dates, but then you also think of the day. For me, it was the diagnosis day that was truly, that's when I received the news that my son was not going to live past his first birthday. And so it's really significant and meaningful that we're having this conversation today of all days. And later on this afternoon, I'll be presenting to a company on grief and loss and helping them. So it makes me feel, if it makes me feel fulfilled through all that I've been through, that I'm able to sit with people like yourselves who are willing to be vulnerable and share to help others through their own grief and loss. So yeah, I'm really blessed to be here with you today.
Well, I'm really honored to hear that because that's oftentimes I've had that happen in a strange circumstance in this podcast where these, like you said, we always remember a birth date and a death date, but sometimes we don't remember those dates in between where we do have those moments that come through. And for me, mine was the 22nd of September when I got that awful news, and I certainly empathize with you on that front. It's a day that we oftentimes forget because the bigger moment happens after, but it's that pivotal moment where our life does begin to change in that way that's unexpected in many ways, and we're not necessarily prepared to deal with that.
Yeah, and talking about pivotal moments, I mean, I was to share my story, I was 20, 26, 27 years old. I don't remember how old I am. Um, but I had already had a child who was a preemie. My daughter Isabel, she was born 9 weeks early, and so when our second was born, and like that gut instinct that something wasn't right as a mom, but couldn't pinpoint what it was, and frustration, and just that horrible gut feeling. And then 2 weeks after September 11th, and my husband was in the army at the time, bringing my son into Bethesda Naval Hospital, and assuming I was going to get, like, I don't know, like he might have a disability or something that we could deal with. and getting the news that our son had a disease called spinal muscular atrophy that I couldn't even pronounce and had never heard of. It was just the worst moment of my life. And so everyone has pivotal moments in their life, and you get to make a choice at that point on how you're going to carry on. And so we were told to take him home and love him. That's what we did. We had a hospice for our son. Um, and it was just a really, really dark time in our life. However, there was glimmers of light throughout those times. I mean, I think anyone that goes through those difficult times, there's always those little moments where you find gratitude. And I did throughout that time. Our son passed away at the age of 9 months. And what was ironic, another irony, was that he passed away early morning of March 2nd, and my niece was born around 11 p.m. on March 1st. And I was so grateful that it didn't happen the same day, because that would have been horrible for my brother and his family to have that date on this, the same day. Um, and yeah, the day after Stephen's funeral, I miscarried. I was pregnant, and most people didn't know. And then a few months later, got pregnant again, and the baby is affected by SMA. So I had this like period of like, just, I don't know, it was less than a year of like three losses. But to me, the major loss was Steven. So the other things were kind of just like, I don't want to say brushed under the carpet, but I had just lost my 9-month old son and experienced two more losses so quickly. So I was in survival mode for a long time in my life. And that's really where the journey of like survival mode, which Chris, you can understand, and anyone that's going through any tough time in life, it's not just loss of a person, it's a divorce or a job, or life as you know it is not going to be the way you know it. And so it's really navigating those times in your life to find the healing, to find the light, and to find the purpose. So that's kind of like my journey in a nutshell with grief. And then lost my dad a few years later, to pulmonary fibrosis and cancer. And it was just a very dark time for a long time.
I'm really glad you brought up survival mode because that's something that I think people that, I have a hard time putting it in words, but I just will say that unless you've really experienced something like that, like child loss, for example, it's very hard to relate to it. It's very hard to understand it. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of survival mode really means that we're in this place where we literally can't get out of the box sometimes. We're living so much in that moment of loss that it's hard to live a normal life. It's hard to get up with purpose. It's hard to find glimmers of hope or even find purpose in your day. It's hard to get back to normal is what I like to say. And I use that word loosely because I don't like the word normal. I don't think it's a real way to describe things. But when we are in that survival mode, I mean, we're literally just trying to take care of ourselves. We're literally trying to just every day do the basics of life. Um, because when you lose a child, I think the hardest thing, and you can relate to this, when you lose a child, it's the fact that this child never got to see the world and experience the world. It never got to, in a lot of ways, we never got to have that life that we planned for, that we knew that our life was changing in big ways, and we were mentally preparing ourselves for that. And then when we lose our child, it's like a curveball out of left field, and we go, okay, well, I don't even know how to deal with this, let alone understand this, and why did this have to happen? And we go through so much heavy, heavy process that we just end up in survival. And I don't think people that are in that space really get the sight or understanding from other people around them most of the time to realize that you're not going to get over this quick. You're not going to move on from it very fast. And it's really a matter of working through some seriously hard mental patterns and some very hard mindsets that are, you just get stuck in that place. And I try to tell people that's okay. It's part of the process. There's nothing wrong with you. You're trying to process in your own way what just happened, and you're trying to make sense of it, find meaning of it, find purpose from it. And for some people, they can do that very quickly. Other people, it can take years.
Yeah.
Can you describe a little bit, which is why I'm bringing this up, can you describe a little bit of what that transition was like for you going from survival mode and getting back to a routine in life and maybe, share a little bit about when you were in survival mode, what were some things you did to take care of yourself?
Yeah, what comes to mind, Stephen passed away in March, and then, it's Easter, and we had a 2-year-old. And I remember being on this like Easter bunny train ride with our daughter and my husband. And the world carries on whether you want it to or not, right? And so all these things are still going on around you. And I just remember this crazy, odd feeling of like all these people are living their life and I'm inside like freaking dying. Like I just buried my child. And for people that don't like, and they only have one like yourself, like you have this emptiness and there's no way to really fill that because you don't want to turn to drugs or alcohol or other vices. And so for me, and I didn't, thank goodness, for me, I turned to exercise. Like I've been a runner my whole life. And so survival mode for me was like getting outside. I dug into purpose right away. Even before our son passed, I reached out to some local moms who were in the SMA community, and there weren't many, but I found them. And I networked with them. They supported me through all we were going through. And I started a nonprofit chapter with my family in memory of Stephen. Well, he was still alive when we started it. And so already it gave me some purpose. And maybe I kind of buried my head in it for a little bit. It was kind of numbing because I felt like if I could help others through this. I mean, I was getting calls even before Stephen passed from other families with the same diagnosis. We started doing a lot of a lot of fundraising. And so for me, survival was what can I do with this energy, because it wasn't always positive energy, right? And that was creating events to raise money to find a treatment and cure, which today there are treatments for SMA. There's babies like Stephen who are now sitting up and walking. And that's incredible. Like that was always in my life. Like if I could see that happen, I know that what I did and what my family rallied around was not in vain. And so finding something, no matter what it is, just to kind of dig yourself into that's positive can really help, even if and when, because you're in survival mode, can really help that journey of healing. But again, Chris, we had just talked before we got on this, like it's ebbs and flows. Like you feel like you're fine. And then there's just something that will just like pull the rug out from under you and you're just kind of left there breathless. So yeah, I mean, it was for me, it was digging into that nonprofit and getting up because I had a purpose with my daughter, even though there are days I just could, barely get out of bed. I still had to show up for other people.
And I think that's, a lot of people don't realize what a challenge that is to pull yourself in that space. Because like you said, the world keeps going, things keep moving. And oftentimes when we are in that space, we feel like the world's going, but we're sitting here, we're not moving. And uh, that's a hard place to fight through. So I appreciate you sharing that you did a lot of work in that nonprofit to kind of move that energy around. I've always tried to share with people to do, I call it the 1% rule a day. That's what I call it. Because I really feel like just getting out of bed is an accomplishment in that phase of life. Making
Yeah.
breakfast for yourself, a phase of accomplishment. Even walking out your front door and just smelling air for the first time, that's an accomplishment in that process. And I try to tell people, when you take baby steps towards that versus trying to leap and bound your way through it, it's going to put you in a more stable place when you get out of that stuck mode and into that place of where you can start healing. And so I've just found that very powerful to just look at each day as a very small accomplishment and build off that. And
Yeah.
I do believe that you'll find purpose and meaning through it. It's really just, it's about when it's right for you and in your time.
Absolutely. And asking people for help, what you're doing is so important, especially for men because they don't typically share their emotions and feelings. I mean, at that point in our life, I'm married 28 years almost, but we dealt with it very differently, as I'm sure you and your wife have. When you go through the loss of a child, I think the divorce rate is over 50%, and actually might be higher than that. And there was even people that commented to us, and we're like, and I remember we went to therapy like a few months after, and again, he was in the army, so you're kind of like you don't get many options with counselors or therapists. But I went in there and I was just like, and I think we talked about this initially. I was like, that was such a waste of time. How can someone who's never, they might not even have kids, but they've never lost a child, how can they sit there and help me through my process? I don't need a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist. I need someone that's walked this to hold my hand and tell me what you're feeling is absolutely 100% normal. And we all are going to go through these different phases. And there's no like linear way of walking the path. Like there's going to be some really dark days and there's going to be days where you're okay. And so it's really important to reach out to people that you can relate to, that can understand the pain.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I got comments over the last couple days celebrating Caden's birthday, and everybody's saying, "Oh, it's beautiful you made a cake, and I love the way you guys celebrate." And I love that and I appreciate that, but I will say a lot of people don't see what's behind the scenes of that. And I'll just say, because you've experienced it, losing a child, it brings up hard feelings. People don't know. I cried right in my Facebook post. I cried with tears rolling down my face as I wrote that thing. It brings back all those hard memories of things, holding my child in the world stillborn, and even to lose a child at 9 months. I mean, I've met a lot of parents who've gone through losing an infant somewhere between the time you did and 2 years old, 4 years old, and the crazy part is I can't even imagine that because that would shatter me in so many ways. But at the same time, they look at my story and feel the same. And so what you said was so important about when you go to a therapist or a psychologist, some of these people haven't walked your walk of life. They have not experienced that. And I say it, not to be critical of anything, but when you are trying to talk to somebody who's not gone through child loss and you just lost a child, and I don't care what circumstance it fell under, they're not going to be able to relate to you. They're going to look at you like deer in the headlights and trying to empathize, trying to understand. And people do the best they can, but I'm just going to say when you find somebody who's walked your walk and has experienced what you've experienced, you'll find a connection that's so deep, it will help you, believe it or not, when you are in that survival mode. Somebody's actually going to say, I get you, I understand you, it's okay where you're at right now. How can I help you? How can I support you? They may share, by the way, say, when I lost my child, this is what worked for me, or this was what might have helped for me, or, I found this resource. Finding people that have gone through your loss the way you have, I can tell you right now, hands down, is better than finding a therapist in so many ways. And you'll get a loving, empathetic, compassionate connection with somebody, and that I will say can speed up your healing journey in so many ways, but it's going to do it in the right way and the purposeful way for you.
Yeah, I think people poo-poo that word coach. Like if I say I'm a grief coach, they don't understand there's been a lot of work behind that, number one. And I know you're the same way. You've put in the certifications and time, and it's not like you're just calling yourself a coach. You've walked that. You understand what people are going through. You can empathize and be there to support them without telling them like what's right or wrong. And so it is so important to have people like ourselves to share our story, number one, and to be vulnerable and real. And like you said, like there's tears behind, like the tears are what's mixing that cake, right? Like when you said that
Yeah.
about the cake, I'm thinking like visualizing tears are like the mixture. Like this is what represents my son, and it's that shouldn't be. He should be here eating the cake, and it's just so powerful. I just think of that what you just said, and it's like you have that like visual. But yeah, I'm just thankful for people like you that are willing to like have the real talk, make it, let's make it like this is legit. I remember I was a pharmaceutical rep out of college, and you have this ideal life plan on how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And I worked for one company and I was with a competitor and he looked so sad, and I'm like, and he was young, and I walked up to him and I'm like, hey, how you doing? Because he always ran into like reps, and he just shared that he had lost his 2-year-old to leukemia, and I was just like, as a new mom. And I remember thinking, I could just never imagine that'll never happen to me. But oh my God, I'm so sorry. And how many times do we do that in life? And then it is you. And so that moment has always stuck with me. I think I talked about it in my book. Like, don't think it can't happen to you. And that's why you always have to be understanding and empathetic to people's situations.
I couldn't agree more with you about that because that's what I have learned being a grief coach and talking to people in so many areas of life is we oftentimes, brush off grief in so many ways because, I read a thing recently that's really powerful and I had this perspective, but I couldn't put it in words. And it basically said that we can really only empathize to the level of experiences we have in life. And when somebody comes to our door with grief, especially people like you and I have had child loss, that's a very hard one for a lot of people, and it makes them very uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
It's making them uncomfortable because sometimes it forces them to face the grief they've gone through in life and they're not ready yet. And so we do give out those kind of blanket statements to people. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine that happening to you, or I couldn't imagine having that happen in my own life. And it's brushing off a lot of things where, back to what you said about having the real conversation. I am that kind of coach. I know you are too, by the way, that I want to have that real conversation. I want that person to have a safe space to just share the story like you're sharing about Steven today, in its entirety, because that's where there's so much power in that story. That little life wasn't for nothing. That didn't happen just because. That life came into your world to teach you things, to give you gifts, to give you blessings. And I'm not saying you're going to have that moment, by the way, when you're in the moment of darkness and you're going to say, oh, it's fine and I can become empowered. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that that life is going to walk you through certain things of life. It's going to give you experiences. It's going to raise your awareness of certain things, and it's going to make you a stronger person. And to find those individual gifts, and I'm sure Steven gave you a lot of them, by the way. I can just tell talking to you. I'm thinking of him as a super baby, honestly, right now. But I just, at that point, you'll start finding that place of gratitude and appreciation. And I don't like the phrase celebration of that moment, but honoring and remembering that because without Steven, you wouldn't be who you are today in many ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, truly, truly a gift.
One thing I wanted to talk to you about too that you brought up is the divorce rate. People talk about that all the time, and I wanted to ask you, being married to your husband for so long and going through those losses, I know that when people lose a child, it is very hard. It is a high divorce rate in the lost community. And I find that very sad in a lot of ways because I feel like the mom and dad both go through that loss together in that moment. And what's often not talked about is that the husband and wife will grieve differently. They're different people. And, I'll use my own experience of things. My wife is a very internal griever. She keeps things in, and I'm a very external griever. And so I do feel that in relationships in that type of loss, being mindful of how one another grieves, how one another copes with things, and that gives a big teaching moment for your relationship. It also can help you bring it yourself together in many ways. I wanted to ask, how did you and your husband navigate through that loss with Steven? And did you guys find ways to come together closer through that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say it was kind of messy and it was such a crazy time in life, like I said, because we continued to go through loss. And he was in the army, and I was like, he's going to get deployed, right? Like 9/11 just happened. And fortunately, they kept him home because he was on that list. And we moved we were in Maryland and we moved to Fort Drum, not knowing that was the most deployable base. And I think partly we talked about it, but things were very surface level at that point, because we were both in survival mode in our own ways. And so we just kept putting one foot in front of the other. Um, and I think because we did so much work with our nonprofit, like we spent so much time that kind of covered a lot of it. Like again, it would just kind of put a blanket over it so that it wasn't talked about. Um, and there's no blame here. Like looking back, I'm like, he dealt with it one way. But it was interesting because I got pregnant with our third child, Steve or Blaze. And once we found out, because we went through CVS testing to see if he was affected, and he wasn't, thank goodness. But Jay then got deployment orders. And so here we were again going through another process of like, I just can't get a break, right? And so I moved back to New Jersey with my family, and I had Blaze in New Jersey. And as Blaze was being born, Jay was like on the tarmac. They were ready to deploy, but not deployed yet. And so he wasn't there for the birth of Steven. So not was I not only traumatized of having another baby and having major like even though I knew Steven was not affected, I was still traumatized. And then my husband's being sent to a war zone. And so there was again another tumultuous time where then I got postpartum. Like it was horrible. And that's when I did reach my breaking point. I went to see, I shared with my parents, I'm like, I'm suicidal. Like at this point, Blaze was only 2 months. I couldn't function. And we had a big, huge nonprofit event going on at the same time. But I just remember at that point, I was like, I can't do it anymore. Like I wanted to just drive off the bridge. Like, And so I did get help. And when I shared all of the stuff, I saw one of my dad was a doctor. I saw one of his psychiatrist friends, and he's like, your husband needs to come home. And so they called him back. He was stationed, he was there for 4 months, 5 months, called him back. And I remember feeling such shame. So we just dealt with so many. That doesn't really answer your question, but it just goes like it was like it was like a snowball. And so I don't really know how we got through it. We just both knew we weren't going to give up, that our marriage was worth fighting for. There were times where we talked about like, should we separate? But we had a lot of blessings too. And sometimes we don't see those blessings amongst all of the crap we're going through. So we just didn't give in because we remembered the love we started with, and that our love has created these children, whether they're here or not, is still part of who we are. And now, 28 years later, we're still putting a lot of work into our marriage and have helped a lot of couples through their own process of grief and loss, and really putting in the work to survive and to thrive. So, yeah, that was a lot, but I wanted to share that backstory, that there's so much more that we kept encountering. And it just felt like it's like we should not be together based on all we went through, right? And I hated being an army wife. So there was so much. I just remember, like, I'm sitting, do you know where Fort Drum is? It's in New York, in the middle of, sorry for anyone that lives there, but it's like the armpit of the world. There's nothing there. It's very cold and dreary. I knew no one, so it was very isolating. And I remember when he got his deployment orders the night before we're going to go drive to New Jersey for me to stay with my parents. I was sitting in the bathtub and just like sobbing. And I'm like, I'm not getting out. Like, if I stay here, I don't have to leave. I don't have to face all the things. And that's a part of my book, Tears in the Shower. But yeah, so just a lot. Like, we've been through a lot, but we just remember why we love each other. We are very intentional about spending time, like, throughout our marriage, every year, getting away by ourselves, to come back to the base, to the foundation.
Well, I'm glad you shared that story, because what I try to do on this podcast is show people that grief is not a linear process by any demeanor. And it is very messy. It's mucky at times. And I appreciate your honesty, by the way, and sharing that. I don't want to go to that fort. I don't want to go to New York. It's the armpit of the world. I don't like this. Like, I
Yeah.
love you sharing that, because I had a lot of those feelings when I lost Caden. My wife wanted me to go to a hospital event with lost parents, and everything in my body was like, don't go, don't go. You're gonna have to listen to so many sad stories. You're gonna have to listen to this and that and the other. You're gonna get triggered at the yin yang. I was glad I went, by the way. I had a great time, and I say that from the standpoint I made a lot of good connections with people who
Yeah.
understood me. But it's that when you're in that grief thing of fight and flight constantly, and when you're stuck in that area, there's some basic things in life that are good for you that will literally feel like a threat. They will feel like, I don't want to do this. This isn't safe. My brain can't handle this. This is very messy. This is all over the place. It can feel very overstimulating. So I appreciated you sharing that story to show people that as you're going through these things, it's not going to be just this yes or no easy decision. It's going to be a lot of fighting yourself and trying to get yourself to be open to something, but you might take, I always call it taking, one step forward and five steps back is what it feels like. And
Yeah.
in that season of grief, that's completely normal. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to take some time to ask you too about your experience. You became a TEDx speaker. You've gone through Ziegler training and Maxwell. How did you get into that coaching realm, as you went through grief? What led you down that path?
Yeah, like I mentioned, Chris, I was in survival mode, but I was still doing all the mom things. I was a stay-at-home mom for all intents and purposes, but I would work at night, um, because I had lost, like, I didn't want to lose anymore. And I was like, for parents that have more children, it's like you want to control so they don't, because that was my fear. I lived in fear all the time. Something was going to happen to my other kids. Like, if they got a fever, if they got, like, I went right to, they're dying. And so I fought that for so long. But that being said, I still did all the things as a mom, like, PT, all the stuff. Was very involved in the community where I lived in Delaware. I worked in a lot of different capacities in wellness and health. I taught a lot of classes, personal training. I did a lot of speaking events on health and wellness because I'm very passionate about that. That's actually what my TEDx is about. I'll share that with you. But really, it was. I just knew I needed more to fulfill me. Like I got to my early 40s and I'm like, I don't want to live like in survival mode anymore. And like, I felt like I had forgotten so much of what I had experienced with my kids because I was living in survival mode. And so I happened to see something about John Maxwell and I was like, I'm going to go to that. I asked like, can we invest in this? Like, it's a big investment when you have kids that are going to college soon. So I attended that. It gave me the confidence to start a mastermind. And then I was like, I'm going to open a gym. Like, why not? So taking chances on myself. And then I was like, well, what's next? Like, how can I pour into me to then help others, to give me more tools? And so then I saw something about Zig Ziglar, who I knew nothing about, heard a podcast, reached out to them, and they interview you. And then right before COVID, went to do a Ziglar Legacy certification. I'm actually talking to Tom Ziglar this afternoon. So anyone that like has heard of Zig Ziglar, the family is incredible. Like they have become part of my family. For someone that's so big, they make it feel like so small. Um, and that was like a turning point for me. I wrote my book. I just became better for myself. Have tools to like to get through COVID with just opening a gym. And then I was like, you know what? What's next? Like I saw people talking about TEDx. I'm like, well, what is that? Like, how do I do that? And so, it's connection. It's not giving up. It's being persistent. If you know it's a calling, to me, it's like you don't ignore the calling God is giving you. And I'm working through that right now with something big I'm working on. Is that God is calling me to do this, and I can't ignore it anymore. That I need to be sharing my story with more people. What you're doing. So it was just like a stepping stone. It was like I just kept thinking, what else can I do to give me the tools? Because we're helping the people that we once were, right? That's what we do.
Mm.
And so I think of the person I used to be and with the work I've put in to now be able to help people that I used to be so they can better their life. And so that's really how it started. I just kept investing in myself. And I've just recently invested in a mastermind program with Amberly Lago, who is an incredible human being. Everyone should follow her. But she shares her story of getting hit by a truck and almost losing her leg, being in a coma, like a lot of trauma, and how she found joy throughout her process and how she uses grit. And so I'm doing a program with her and some women. And so it's like you have to invest in yourself. We invest in all our everything else, right? We spend money on dinner and this and that, but how are we really truly investing in us? And that's where the magic happens.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. I'm stuck on a phrase that you said just now of helping people like we used to be. I that is really profound in many ways in my head right now because it's such a true story that because we've walked this experience in life, because we've gone through losing a child, we're able to help people that are going through that phase of things. And you're able to help people in a very niche field of spinal and muscular atrophy. You're able to help people in that niche area understand what that is and what transpires from it and raising awareness of it. You're able to help people that are where you were when you first heard about it, but you didn't know anything about it or have the knowledge with it, but now you do. And so you're able to make such a big imprint with people in that light. I think that's such a beautiful way to look at our grief experiences because it is very true that I wouldn't be able to help people that have lost a child 2, 3, 4 years ago. I wouldn't be able to help people with that. And so I'd love for listeners to take that away. Is think about helping people where you once were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, something that you've gone through. Um, Jessica, that's such a powerful takeaway today. And I love
I
that
can't
you're,
take ownership of that. I hear that. Like I listen to so many different podcasts and I'm always like trying to soak up all what everyone else is saying. So I've heard that maybe said in a little different way, but that's really what it is.
well, I love that you pour back into yourself because that's why I got into coaching. I used to get called the sponge growing up. I was called that by so many people, past employers, bosses, managers, people that knew me. And they said, you're always reading stuff. You're always listening to stuff. You're always watching TED Talk videos and all this stuff. And I said, when you absorb yourself with that much information all the time, I mean, you really open up your toolbox to help pretty much anybody. And I just said, that's the best place to be in life because I do think that one of the big parts of grief that I've learned is that you're going to learn and evolve through that process. It's not going to be this sad, terrible, tragic thing for a very long time. It's going to be this moment that happened to you and it shifted you really radically. But it's also teaching you things through that process. And so our life is really founded on a collective of experiences and what we learn and take away from those moments. And more importantly, by the way, I resonate with you on the faith side of things, what we do with that. How do we help other people? How do we raise awareness for a cause or a event that has happened in our life? How do we help other people through that? So I think that very well sums up the journey of why we're here and why we do what we do.
So true. Yep.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your books that you've written. It sounds like you've written a couple books.
Yeah. So I wrote Triumph Through the Tears, Finding Hope and Purpose Through Loss over COVID. Again, that was one of my goals I had set in the Ziegler Legacy certification. And I was like, wow, no better time, right? And so I wrote that book really to help people like share my story, but what were the tools that helped me? And one of my frameworks is called the 5G mindset, which I actually do some presentations on. But it's using your 5 intrinsic gifts of practicing gratitude, generosity, like through small acts of kindness, growth. We just talked about like soaking up like a sponge, grit, and grace. And so, how can you use those tools each day that are free to reframe your mindset and to have a better day? It also makes a great talking point with other people. Like, what's your five? Like, how did you use your 5 gifts today? And so, that's always a reflection for me at night, too, to think how I did that. And it's very subtle things. And that, and just sharing like how important it is to really show up for your own health, because we want to take care of everyone else, but unless you're healthy yourself, you can't show up for people fully. And that was a big part of like my dad's story. Was he was a primary care doctor in a small town in New Jersey, and I watched him like literally take care of everyone else, worked 15 hours a day, did house calls. We had people coming in our house for treatment. He was like an old school doctor. And he neglected his own health and passed away at 62. And so my TEDx is about my son and my dad meeting in heaven, and my son lecturing my dad, like, why didn't you take better care of yourself? Because Stephen never got a choice. Your son never had a choice. And so we got to take ownership that we are given a gift, and we need to be taking care of this gift, which is our mind, body, and soul. And that's a very big part of like who I am and my message.
I really love that. That's very similar to my mindset that I share. I live in the place of gifts, lessons, and blessings is where I live my life. And I
Yeah.
always say every moment, some moments are going to be very big gifts for you. Some moments are going to be lessons to teach you. And sometimes you're going to get a blessing out of nowhere, something you didn't expect that happens. And so I love that you said that about your son meeting your father in heaven. I think that's a very beautiful analogy because there's so many people in the world today, and I see it a lot. There's people that are literally neglecting themselves, trying to please everybody and do everything for everyone, and really sacrificing themselves to an extreme. And that works really well in the short term, but as you get older in life, that's not going to pay out well. And so
Yeah, it catches
I
up.
it catches up. And so I really do think that it's the old metaphor of flying on an airplane, put your mask on before you start helping other people. And that's really where I think I get asked sometimes, how can you be a grief coach? How can you handle all these hard stories from people and heavy things? It's not my experience. I didn't walk it, but I am here to listen. And so from that standpoint, I've taken care of myself in many ways, and it took a long time to get there, by the way. It didn't happen overnight, but
Yeah.
I am in a place now where I can help people. And I think that's what I want to encourage, with you guys hearing Jessica's story, by the way. Take care of yourself and do what you guys need to do for yourselves because I can tell you when you're in a great place, you can not just help one or two people, you can help 200. You can. And that's the beautiful gift that we all get through our grief journeys.
Yeah.
So, Jessica, if you're open to it, I do talk about faith on my show a little bit, and I wanted to open up a little conversation about that if you're open.
Absolutely.
How has faith played a role in your grief processes and the losses you've gone through with Stephen and your two other unborn children and losing your father? How has that played a role in helping you navigate grief and helping you see the path forward in life?
I'm not going to lie, I grew up Catholic. And so when Stephen was diagnosed and it was towards the end of his life, it was actually the night before he had passed, we brought in a Catholic priest to give his last rites because he was baptized. And I was just very disheartened that that priest offered no hope. Like, I was just like, what? Like, everything I believed in, I thought he would give us some comfort. And so after Stephen passed, I was lost for a long time. Very confused, very angry, kept going through more losses, and then was faced with terminating a pregnancy that can be very judged as a Catholic and in general in society. And again, most people didn't know. Now I'm very open about it because this is part of my journey. And it was a very personal decision, knowing what Stephen had gone through. If people knew the messiness of his health and how he had to fight every day with feeding, with oxygen masks and feeding tubes and stopping breathe, like it was awful. No human should live that way. And so it took a long time for me to work through that with God, right? And I've always been a person of faith. There's a lot of conversations, and it took a while to get back to like church. And now my faith has shifted again, where I'm very close. Like, I have a very good connection with my faith and with God. I don't necessarily feel like I need a church for that. I feel I'm closest to God in nature. And my husband and I are working through this process right now, really digging deeper into our faith. We've joined some Christian couples groups. And so it's a process for everyone. And my journey is going to be different than yours, Chris. But all I know is that I have to believe. And I believe in signs as well. Like, I believe there's truly another dimension, that I will be reunited with Stephen and my dad and all those who have passed before me. Because I feel like if you don't have any faith, what's the point of living a good life? One, and two, like, what do you have to look forward to then, right? And so faith has just been a very big part of me growing up. It was instilled in me. It's changed over the years with Catholicism to now more Christianity and just having a relationship and prayer. And so it's been my foundation and base for a long time. And it's gotten me through a lot of dark times in life. Like, my mom suffered a massive stroke a few years after my dad died, and she almost died twice. And that was another point in my life where I was like, I just got to hold on to my faith and believe that God's got this. And so my four words are let go and let God, because there's so much I try to control. That's how I'm wired. And I'm really trying to just be very mindful that this is in God's time, that I'm his servant. I'm here to serve other people. And someday I'll be with my son. So that's pretty much how I live my life.
I think you said that very well because that's a hard lesson I walked in my faith when I lost Caden was I got very angry at God and said a lot of things, but I told him that
Yeah.
moment that I'm giving up control of my life. I weird people out when I say that all the time because there's so many people that are like, you're giving up control. Like, how can you do that? You gotta think about this, and like their mind just starts going. And I start saying, I learned very quickly how much little control we actually have, like actual control.
Yeah.
And when you find that out, yeah, it is scary. And when you unplug yourself from realityville on the planet, you find out real quick you don't control a lot of things. And so ever since I made that choice, I told God, I said, I don't control things, you do. And I said, so if I let go right now, why don't I just let you guide the ship? Why don't I let you show me the opportunities, put the people in front of me I need to serve, the people I need to help, guide me through that. And ever since I let go and made that shift in my life, it's been amazing because I meet people like you every day. And
Yeah.
I'm very, very grateful for that. So I appreciate you sharing your prospects on faith because I do feel like that plays a very integral role in our life, especially in those hard moments of loss. And
Yeah.
so, Jessica, I
Well, I
want
think
to ask you,
I was gonna say
sorry, go ahead.
everyone has a cross to bear. Some are heavier, some are lighter, but our job is to help pick up that cross, whatever it is. And that's how I try to live my life. Not perfect, but that's what I try to do.
I think that's beautiful because that's the reason we're all here is to help one another.
Yeah.
I try to tell people, regardless of our differences and our labels and everything like that, we are walking this journey together on this planet,
Yeah.
just different directions sometimes, different destinations. But
Yep.
sometimes we need a helping hand to get there.
Yeah.
So, I have a powerful question I want to ask you. What would you tell, you don't need to tell me how old you are, by the way, but
I don't care. I'm
what,
51. I've earned
what,
every year.
What would you tell your 20-year-old Jessica self, what you have learned here at this point in your life? What would you tell her back then?
To let go and let God. I think I think we try to like we have this vision of how life is going to work, and it's not always going to go that way. And so trying to let go of the things I can't control, because I do try to, in my mind, it's always going, and it's something I'm working with a spiritual coach right now. And what he said is once you surrender, that's when the magic happens. That's when the flow happens. And so really working on that. Um, that's probably the message. And I try to teach my kids that too. I have three kids, 26, 22, and 19. And I'm like, life is not always going to go the way you want. So just, you control what you can, but surrender what you can. I'm trying to really instill the faith piece because I feel like a lot of younger people are struggling with that. So yeah,
I think that's beautiful advice. Reason I ask you that question is I look back because my younger self was like, the world's this, it's going to be this direction and this, and I kind of found out real quickly. I'm like, nah, you'll be going this way, and life comes along and punches you off that way,
yeah,
um, all the time. And so, like you said, when you surrender to things, that path shows itself, and that's when your life starts flowing. When you give up the control, just
yeah.
surrender and let things be.
It's a work in
Um,
progress.
Yes, that's the story of life. And so, Jessica, as we wrap up the podcast, I usually ask my guests two questions. One of them is if you were to run into somebody going through grief right now, or even somebody who feels stuck in grief, what's one thing of advice you would share with them?
To ask for help, to not feel like you have to do it alone. I think too often as humans, we are um, too humbled or too embarrassed or ashamed to say I need help. And there's people like us who are willing to help walk through that path with you. And so, yeah, I would say that would be my piece of advice.
I think that's beautiful because I've watched a lot of people, including myself, try to do things alone at times. And I will say, when you can find somebody, as Jessica and I shared today, find somebody that has walked your walk of life, somebody who's gone through what you've gone through. You don't have to walk it alone. Somebody else has already been that path. Let them guide you. Let them be part of your journey with you. That can make the biggest difference. I love that advice. And then, Jessica, I also want to ask if people want to connect with you after listening to this podcast, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I just rebranded. My website is therealwellness.net, and Jessica Smith Moyer on Facebook, Moyer.Jessica on Instagram. Still building out, like, I'm still a little on the fence about TikTok. But yeah, they can just shoot me an email, jessmoyercoach@gmail.com. I also have like a free grief journal that if anyone wants, I can send it to you, Chris, if you want to send it out to your audience. I'll be using that today as I facilitate a company call that can really just kind of help you navigate grief and also know, like, we a little talked about, like, when someone says something awkward or how do they respond to our grief, because that's always an uncomfortable situation. It's like some comebacks to that.
I really love that. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes so
I'll
people can
send it to you.
download
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Well, Jessica, I just want to say thank you so much for being a guest on today's show. You have a powerful and a very beautiful story, and I truly feel like Stephen, your two unborn children, losing your father, all those grief experiences really put you in a place where you could serve others at a higher level of contribution. And I feel like you live to remember them and honor them as part of your journey. And I think you're a beautiful person. So thank you so much for being real and open and honest and vulnerable today with your grief story. I very much appreciate getting to interview you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. And thank you for opening your heart and sharing as a male, especially on being vulnerable and walking this journey and offering this platform for others.
That's my goal is to help other people through this, and it sounds like you and I are doing it today.
Yeah.
So thank you. Well, I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Jessica and I on today's episode, The Empower Grief Journey. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Jessica's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Podbean. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know that you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.